Meet the Ones, a weekly MMA podcast. I'm Genya, and we are your Ukrainian Dream Team hosts, and we are bringing you a juicy and exciting episode 19.
And I'm Dema. We are back with another stacked episode. First, we'll start off with a little bit of news, then we'll go over UFC Fight Night 111 results. We'll also preview a couple of events coming up this weekend, starting with Bellator 180, as well as UFC Fight Night 112.
Yeah, what a stacked weekend we got coming up, Dema, with Bellator 180 and UFC Fight Night 112. Before we get started, you can find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, MMApodcast.com, or anywhere the top podcasts are heard.
First, we'll start off with some news and current events. And of course, we cannot go and start the show without saying something about the current announcement that shocked the MMA and, fighting landscape, as well as boxing. You might know what I'm talking about. Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, Dema, this news took over MMA news and boxing news this week. And in a week that we had some pretty big boxing and MMA matches, it was by far, the biggest talk of the MMA landscape. And it was in every news publication that we can remember. And it's kind of a big deal. I mean, Mayweather is, the best boxer, arguably, of our generation. And he's going against, one of the best MMA artists right now. Surely the two highest profile fighters in their categories. And I don't remember this ever being done before. This is going to break a lot of numbers. It's a big deal.
Yeah, man. I mean, for one, I am glad to put the speculations behind me. It's finally official, and it is going to happen. I agree with you. This has never happened before. This is uncharted territory. And, I'm not going to say I'm not going to watch it. I will. This is going to be interesting, obviously, to me. But I will stick with my prediction that, McGregor is coming to another world, and he's gonna get schooled in that world. A world he's very unfamiliar with in a lot of aspects. And, yeah, man.
Yeah, no, I'm not going against with your prediction that he's going to get completely outclassed in there. And this is a guy that completely dominated Pacquiao. So I'm not expecting Conor to do any better. However, Conor's pretty much already won. By getting that contract, by getting that fight, see, this brings up a lot of talking points, and I'm sure I could spend the whole episode as well as you could, just talking about this fight alone, which we're not going to do to you because I'm sure you've been hearing about is Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. With that being said, this might be both of their last fights. Conor's not going to go back to the UFC and make anywhere near the amount of money that he's going to make off of this fight. So it's kind of like going from eating, $40 filet mignons, to go eating $100 steaks. All of a sudden, you're not going to go back to that $40 filet mignon. And Mayweather's he's talked a lot about getting to that 50 number, and ironically, this would be once he beats Conor, he'd have 50 wins. So I wouldn't be too surprised if this is a money move for both of them, and we might not see them again after this fight, either one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Conor is getting paid the most he's ever been paid before in his life. And Mayweather this is arguably the easiest money fight for him that he can get as well, with the highest amount of profile. This crossover boxing UFC thing brings a lot of hype behind it.
Yeah, and the name behind Conor brings more money for Mayweather than any boxing name generates right now, which actually says a lot.
Brings the whole country behind it, so you can expect pretty much the country of Ireland to be behind that, buying the pay-per-view, watching the fight.
From a money perspective, this makes perfect sense. This is the highest draw in MMA versus the highest draw in boxing. So we know it's going to draw.
And the money is the reason why it didn't take that long to happen. There's all these ideas about super fights floating here and there, but there's when there's so much potential to make this much money, they're gonna make this work somehow, and it did. We're gonna get to finally see this fight later this summer.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And one last point on it. Do you remember Conor had like even I think right after he beat Aldo, they were talking about what happens if he fights Floyd. I think that kind of talk's been going on since he beat Aldo. And I was one of the proponents of the people that were like, "No, man, that'll never happen. Floyd's too high profile. Athletic Commission won't sanction it." I was wrong on all accounts. And to your point, kind of money trumped everything, and that's how this fight happened. And I don't think it's gonna give MMA a black eye. I think Conor can go in there and completely get wrecked. But if Conor has any kind of success versus Floyd, that's not a good look for boxing.
And it's a great look for Conor. I was going to just say he's a smart man, one of the smartest in MMA. Him and his team are technicians and like grand strategists. They go is they go and plant seeds out there in people's mind, and we kind of saw an example of that with his tussle with Tyron Woodley. He made sure he got it on camera, and he kind of planted the seed that potentially his next fight, if the boxing shit doesn't work out, might be against Tyron, because there was some back and forth there, and they kind of planted that seed for a potential fight against Woodley. So there's things they do to kind of propel these fights forward and make them happen in a way that is really, really ingenious.
Yeah, they're definitely pioneers of the game. I think Conor's got, he's changed the game for a lot of MMA guys, like him or not. He's up the amount of pay MMA fighters in general are making. He's brought more eyes to the sport. So I'm all for a guy like Conor. I would have preferred that he had stayed in MMA and defended the lightweight belt. But am I like you? Am I going to tune in? Of course I am.
He is up in the ante. He's getting people paid. You might not like it, because he's brash and cocky, but you can't deny it. He's very successful, and, he's getting his way no matter what happens in this fight.
And regardless if he got the right matchups or not, he's been backing up his talk, Besides that one fight to Nate Diaz, which he was kind of doing pretty darn well in that fight before Nate Diaz got the rear naked choke. Moving right ahead, this Saturday we had a fight between Andre Ward versus Sergey Kovalev. It was stopped in the 8th round, keeping Ward undefeated at 32-0. This was an interesting fight. Kovalev was kind of having his way for the early rounds, but these are by far the two best light heavyweight boxers out there. And Andre Ward, to his credit, he stayed tough and he started getting some good shots of his own in. And my issue with this fight, Dema, is they had a lot of low blows that they let go, and it looked like the finishing punches were low, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's what I heard. As you were telling me before we recorded, he landed, 2, 3, 4 nut shots in succession that kind of led to anticlimactic end of the fight.
Yeah, and I forget the referee's name, man. It'll come to my mind probably as soon as we finish this podcast. But he was one of the better known referees that's been in there a lot. So maybe he saw something I didn't see on my TV. Maybe he's got a better view of it.
Because they called the fight TKO, and he said all of the shots landed were legit,
were above the belt line.
Which clearly some of them were not.
Yes, I agree. But overall, it was a really good fight. Andre Ward stays the champion with the belt that he took from Kovalev and stays undefeated.
Right on. What's the next little bit of news? We have an exciting signing for Bellator, and it's not what you might think. It's actually commentators being signed this time.
Yeah, Dima, still boosting the team up. Mauro Ranallo and Goldberg are going to team up. First event is going to be this Saturday.
Yeah, which we're going to be excited to cover. The Bellator 180.
Yeah, and just how do you feel about this, man? I'm excited. I think they're going to add, it's going to be Jimmy Smith, Mauro Ranallo, and Mike Goldberg. And to be honest, man, I don't want to be too sentimental on the Shoot the Ones episode, but I kind of miss Mike. And you can't ever go wrong with Morrow. In my opinion, he's one of the best out there, especially with getting the excitement level up. Goldberg, he's kind of a little bit goofy, but he's our goofy guy. I really like Goldberg, man. I think that he cares about his job. He cares about getting it right. And Jimmy Smith is also a pretty good commentator in my eyes with good analysis.
Yeah, man, Goldie is a fan favorite, and people were excited to see where he would go next. And kind of Bellator was the obvious choice. I think this makes a good combination. You have Mauro Ranallo and Mike Goldberg, and Jimmy kind of doing the color commentary. And man, Mike Goldberg brings the hype. Like, it's all over. I don't know if he's allowed to say the same phrases he did for UFC, but
He is.
he is
He is.
excellent.
They
So
didn't trademark those or anything. So
that's
those are
great. So
his.
he pioneered the UFC hype voice. They are still using him in all of their highlight reels, and he is unmistakably Mike Goldberg. He is goofy at times, like you said, but
He's goofy, but he's honestly one of the best out there, especially with getting people excited about a fight.
dude, he's on his. Other than being a great hype man, he's on his P's and Q's. Like he does the spots real well. He does the advertisements pretty much flawlessly for the team, and he's a great addition to any broadcast team. It's doing a podcast for just a few months has really given me some appreciation for the shit that these commentators like Mike Goldberg do.
Yeah, all the homework that they have to do to be as prepared as they are and to have it run as smooth as they want it to.
Exactly. So Morrow exactly is brings a flavor of his own. He's very educated, brings notes of his own. He's educated across all combat sports, not just MMA. Little quick side note: he's gonna be commentating the Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather fight as well as part of his Showtime boxing thing.
Oh, so he still does kickboxing too, right?
Yeah, man, he's all over the place. He's working.
Okay, I didn't know if that's gonna last now with him at Bellator or how that works exactly.
But nonetheless, interesting tidbit I thought I might throw in there. So, yeah, man, him and Boss are like legendary commentators. So Bellator is going to have like a stacked commentator booth.
Yeah, I like the fact that Bellator, they're constantly looking to get better, regardless if it's signing new fighters or now adding to their commentator team. And I look forward, especially with such an awesome card this weekend. I look forward to hearing them. Moving right along, Cyborg finally has an opponent, Dema.
Yeah, some exciting news.
Yeah, man, she'll be fighting Megan Anderson, who Tanya Evinger will be taking her place in her Invicta fight that she was going to have. And Cyborg is going to be meeting Megan Anderson at the UFC 214 card, which is headlined by Cormier and Jones in Anaheim, July 29th.
Yeah, man. This just came out today. I always have issue pronouncing her name. Germaine de Randamie was stripped of her title belt.
I did hear this, yes.
This was announced. She came out and claimed this. I heard about this as they announced the fight with Megan Anderson and Cyborg. So just thought I would throw that in there. This just happened, so it's kind of fresh on my mind still.
Well, Germaine, I think she issued a statement already as well. She might have done that same day type deal.
Yeah, she said she's going back to 135, so.
Is that why they stripped her? I haven't read her statement.
The UFC statement was they stripped her because she's unwilling to fight
Cyborg,
the number one contender, which UFC is clearly pushing Cyborg, and she clearly is the number one, deserves to be so. So there you have it, folks. Cyborg gets to fight Megan Anderson, which is going to be a good fight. We are going to be interested in seeing how prepared Megan comes into this fight. It's going to be the toughest challenge in anyone's career, as far as fighting Cyborg.
Yeah, Megan Anderson, on top of being really pretty, she's got a excellent striking game, and she's ever evolving. But man, she's not quite on that level where I see her giving Cyborg a challenge yet, Dima. Cyborg's been top of the world for like a decade now. with nobody even really close to her. People try to say Rousey was, but I never bought into that. I don't think Amanda Nunes wants any of that. I still think that she's the top girl in the world, and Megan Anderson might get there one day, but I don't think she's going to be ready by July to beat Chris Cyborg. A motivated Chris Cyborg.
Agreed with you. Without dwelling on it for too long, Cyborg is the best female fighter on the planet, period, right now. She's the female Mike Tyson currently, just wrecking competition left and right.
Well, the crazy thing about her, Dema, is she's got such great hands that people don't even know that she's a jiu-jitsu black belt.
Not
she's
only that,
really nasty on the ground, but she never has to use it.
exactly. And, the physique, she's the strongest, always the strongest of the fighters she fights. Still probably in her prime. And
Towards the end.
yeah, which is why we were really campaigning for her to go ahead and get the fights and become the UFC 145 belt, holder.
You got to remember, she sat some of her prime out when she was suspended after that Strikeforce failed drug test.
That did happen. Yeah, that's that little blemish.
So, she's definitely had a little bit of a history.
And she paid the price. Those years definitely took some of her best time out of her career.
I agree, and we can go on about how she's been treated and how her respect level has been, but this fight overall, it's a good fight. Megan is no slouch opponent.
Indeed, I want to add one thing. If Megan has any chance here, that her reach is a good advantage, and Cyborg did fight that Muay Thai fight, which. I don't remember her name. Was it Bars or something?
I forgot her name, but the girl knocked Cyborg down like 3 times. She won the fight. The Muay Thai specialist.
Exactly. She used her reach and her kicking ability
front kicks mostly.
Really, really well. So if Megan kind of has similar frame, she's tall and lanky. So
but
some homework to watch there, and it is an MMA fight, not a kickboxing fight.
Yeah, and if you remember that fight with the kickboxer where she had lost, that fight, if it wasn't Chris Cyborg, more than likely doesn't get sanctioned. That girl was like 40-1 going against 0-0, former champion. There was a big discrepancy, and Cyborg, to her credit, man, she's just a beast. She'll fight anybody anywhere, like she showed with Mañana, and she wants to get in your face, and she gave that girl. she punched that girl hard too.
Shoot a box, never die.
It wasn't like that girl, and that Cyborg was going into her world. And due to Cyborg's just athleticism and overall toughness, she was still able to hold her own against the top of the top.
Yeah.
In her first ever Muay Thai.
Yeah. She just kept coming forward, throwing punches, trying to box.
Actually, I think that was her 4th Muay Thai fight, but all the other ones were against nobodies.
Yeah, they built her up a little bit.
I think she had those Muay Thai fights way before she had that fight against Bars, before she even started her her MMA career, rather.
Mm-hmm.
I think she did Muay Thai 3 fights.
Gotcha.
Some bullshit like that. But she's been kicking ass. Megan Anderson's tough though.
Word. A bit on a sombering note, Matt Hughes did suffer a tragic incident this weekend. We wish him a speedy recovery. I believe he's conscious, and thoughts go out to him and his family. Also, we do want to mention the tragic passing of UFC veteran Tim Hague, who unfortunately passed away this weekend after a boxing fight. So condolences and prayers out to his family as well.
Yeah, really sad news, Dema. We're going to hit you guys with a break, and then we'll get into UFC Singapore.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Next up, we're excited to talk about UFC Fight Night Holm vs. Carrera, also known as UFC Fight Night 111.
Yeah, this event happened in Singapore, and it was one of those weird fight nights where you have to get up at 4:45 to watch. 4:45 a.m. that is, and it makes it kind of tough to watch the fights. I ended up getting up at 7 myself and watching, and I had to rewatch. I had to find the fights the same day on. They were all, luckily for me, they were all on the internet same day, and I was able to still watch all the fights. But these are kind of tough to catch live, being all the way in a different time zone and having to get up at 4:45 a.m. It's a little bit tough on a Saturday.
Yeah, the weird time slot is the reason they kind of relinquished this to their Fight Pass, as I mentioned before. For this one, I was an early bird. I got up nice and early. Was treated to some breakfast and some fights. So I started around the Walt Harris Cyril Asker fight,
It's
which
about the
was
same time as I did. I think that was around 7 o'clock because the main card hit at 8.
you got it. Nonetheless, exciting card. We'll start top to bottom. So we'll talk about Holly Holm and Betch Correa fight first and foremost.
Yeah, this was a real stinker for a while. They both. It seemed like Betch was a little bit hesitant because she knew that Holly was a counterpuncher, and Holly was not going to get out of her game plan of looking for that shot and counterpunching. And the crowd was very displeased with most of this fight. But in the third round, man, we had like an epic moment. This is like an epic moment for MMA, followed by one of the prettiest question mark kick KOs you'll ever see. And the reason why it was so hilarious, Dema, is Betch was in her shit talking game, and she does this in all of her fights. She likes to taunt her opponents and kind of trash talk in there. And she was taunting, and like this was the first time in the fight where she had really taunted, and like because she seemed Betch actually, this was the first time I've seen her have a really solid strategy, Dema, out there. It seemed like she had an idea of how she was going to beat Holly, and even got a few punches off at early rounds. Might have even stole the first round. But it was just funny the way she got knocked out. She was taunting, and then she got hit with that question mark kick, followed with that punch in the face, and her head knocked off the canvas. And it was kind of a brutal KO for what had been a boring fight.
Yeah, you were gonna say it in the beginning, and you just said it right there. It was kind of boring, so not the most exciting performance. There was a lot of hesitancy, so there was a lot at stake here for both of the fighters, especially Holly Holm coming off of 3 straight in a row losses.
And to that point, like a little bit before the knockout happened, do you remember the referee pulled them together? It was Mark Goddard, veteran referee, and he pulled them together. And he's like, "Hey, girls, I respect the strategy, but something's got to give here. Y'all got to fight."
Yeah, he did urge the action, and yeah, to your other point, Betch was taunting throughout the whole fight. Actually, I saw she was throwing a couple of taunts there in the first round, maybe not so much second, but yeah, she did start to kind of try to unsuccessfully bait Holly Holm into engaging with her, which did not play her way. She left her hands down, and that kind of opened her up for the question mark kicks, which is a tricky thing about a question mark kick. The way Holly threw it was, she made Betch think it was going to be a front kick, which she threw a couple of front kicks before in that fight, kind of, led to that point. It was set up really nicely. So Betch started, fluttering her hands about, kind of like at a midsection level, and then the kick just beautifully came around and wrapped and kind of just hit her on the head. Also, the follow-up punch. I wanted to talk about the follow-up punch. That was funny, brutal, and it was a lot of things. It was very George Foreman-esque. She just stepped in with an uppercut and just bonked her head. It was ridiculous looking.
Yeah, maybe a little bit unnecessary. I think she was done at that point, but I think Holly wanted to give the exclamation mark to
Well,
that fight.
there was 2 punches. There was one which was the uppercut that made Betch just fall back down, and then she kind of got down on one knee and followed up with kind of like a small hammer fist. And at that point, Goddard was pulling her off. But yeah,
Yeah.
she did hit her the third time. which might have been the unnecessary one. But that uppercut the timing of that was excellent.
An interesting thing about Holly Holm, she's had all this success boxing, but in MMA, it's not really her hands that have been getting the job done. It's really been her kicks and most of her fights. She's got a really good kicking arsenal and a very strong kick. Good head kick. She's got a couple knockouts now, two very high profile knockouts now with Betch Correa and Ronda Rousey, both
Yeah,
finishing head kicks.
I didn't think I would say this, but she, in my mind, she topped the kick as far as technique wise that she did on Ronda. I mean, it was a prettier knockout. Even it wasn't as significant, her as far as winning the title and ending Ronda's reign, but it was certainly highlight reel worthy.
There's definitely an argument to be made. I enjoyed both of them very much. But like you said, maybe it's because I wanted to see Ronda lose, and maybe the epicness of the moment had a little bit more than fighting Betch, who's ranked number 11.
I'll tell you why. It was with Ronda. It was kind of like a finish her type of a head kick because Ronda was already fucked up at that
Yeah, she was
point.
stunned.
Yeah, so she kind of walked around and okey doked her with that kick. This was a pretty sly setup. She made her flail her hands at midsection level, and she did the switch up mid kick and just hit her right on the head to a fully conscious opponent at that time.
Yeah, that kick was the beginning of the end right there.
Indeed. So moving ahead in the co-main event, we saw Andre Orlovsky and Marcin Tabora in, what was a hell of a fight for, first round, and then it kind of slowed down a lot. Andre Orlovsky was able to overcome a hell of a storm and a beating in the first round. And man, that was rough to watch there for a second.
Yeah, this was an interesting fight. I mean, we both predicted Tabora on the show last week. But and it came out, Marcin Tabora, he's got really good jiu-jitsu game. He's able to switch positions pretty well for a big guy, and he was able to hold on to Arlovsky's back and land a lot of devastating punches where a lesser opponent, would have folded. And we've spoke kind of poorly on Arlovsky's chin in the past, but his chin held up pretty well against Tabora. He was getting hit throughout the first round, and to the point where I thought the fight could have been stopped once or twice.
Me as well.
And in the second round, he came out and won that round. Arlovsky's a real veteran in there, man. This turned out to be a good fight. It ended up where Tabora was a little bit, his corner gave him some really good advice in between round 2 and 3. They said, if you're going to win, you're going to need the takedown here.
Yep.
And he got that takedown. He was able to do a lot of what he did in the first round and win 2 rounds over Arlovsky.
Yeah, but boy, I started going ham when Arlovsky started mounting that comeback. He started throwing, and it wasn't really landing, but I was like, holy shit, he's still in there. So there was some excitement there, but yeah, Tabora kind of punched himself out in the first round, and it caused the slowdown there.
Yeah, exciting fight. And prior to that, they had in welterweight Colby Covington. Was able to really show his improvement and just being able to climb that ladder even more and beating Dong Kim and pretty much dominating Dema. I don't think Kim had any real success in the fight. I mean, he did get a punch here and there, but most of the time was spent with Colby Covington in better position and winning and implementing his wrestling game regardless of, Kim's been a real hard guy to take down in the past. He 80% takedown defense before this fight, and Covington pretty much took him down at will.
Keyword wrestling. I was just thinking here. This fight is something I would call a wrestling clinic, which is exactly what Colby Covington performed here. Yeah, he pretty much did a little bit of everything as far as wrestling. He did a little bit of Randy Couture. He took him down several times. He held him against the cage in several dominant positions and pretty much outworked Stun Gun throughout majority of the fight.
Yeah, I feel like it's a huge tool for him to be able to have Jorge Masvidal, as a main training partner. I think he knows what to expect with the top guys in the division. I don't think with Dong Kim he saw anything that he hadn't seen before, and you could tell in that fight that was the case.
Yeah, definitely a great performance for him. Colby Covington came in there and did his thing here. Moving into the next fight, in the welterweight bout, Rafael dos Anjos defeats Tarek Saffiedine in a unanimous decision in what looked like a good fight for Rafael dos Anjos. He looked really good at this division, healthy. What do you think?
Yeah, we predicted this on the last episode, but what I didn't predict and what I kind of want to highlight here on this show is just how good Rafael dos Anjos looked all week prior to this fight. I mean, at the weigh-ins, he looked healthier than he's ever looked. Not drained at all. And in this fight, man, he's only been knocked out twice in his career. He's always a tough guy to kind of, even when you hit him good, he's got his forehead tucked and he's got his chin down. He's a real tough guy to knock out. And he was able to win unanimous decision with 30-27s on two cards and one card 29-28. And I felt those scores were pretty accurate. He pretty much dominated. He did enough. He didn't dominate the fight exactly, but he did enough in each round to win the round, and where you were like, okay, that guy won that round.
Yeah, it was clearly two. At least he.
I thought he won every round personally because he was able to outwork position and he was able to get more combinations, and they seemed to be landing the better of the punches every round. I'm one of those guys, Dema, and I notice some people do this when they judge a fight. Like for me, at the end of the round, it starts all over. Like because sometimes people are like, oh man, he got beat up that round. He did a little bit better that round. I'm gonna give him the round. You know what
I
I
look
mean?
at it like they win decisively or it's competitive.
Yeah, but you do it the same way. Every round, you just start over. It's a new fight, or new round rather.
Which is, I guess, how you're supposed to judge.
That's
right?
how. Yeah, that's exactly. I try to do it exactly how the judges are supposed to judge it when I do it.
Yeah, that's part of the game.
But I'm saying some people, when they judge, they're like, "Oh, he did a little bit better. I'm gonna give him that round." But that's not really how it works. So even though Saffiedine was doing better in some rounds, I don't feel he did enough to win any of the rounds.
Indeed.
I hope that makes sense.
Nonetheless, Rafael dos Anjos looked really good. The fact, he's stocky and muscular. The fact that he doesn't have to cut down to 155 pounds, clearly shows an advantage here, and we look forward to seeing where he goes from here in the welterweight division. Tarek Saffiedine certainly is no pushover, a former Strikeforce champion, so this was a good, test for him at this division.
Yeah, I agree. It throws him right in the mix with the top 10 guys. And, Cerrone's been having a lot of the success in that division. And it seems like Rafael dos Anjos is a guy that has Cerrone's number and might even be one step ahead of him. But moving on to the undercard, we had some interesting stuff here, Dima.
Indeed. I did happen to catch some of the fights here, the last two, namely. I did see the John Talk over Takanori Gomi, which was a submission rear naked choke, very first round. Also, a pretty badass knockout win. Walt Harris defeats Cyril Asker, also first round. Pretty much dominant performance, came in there, imposed the fight, took Asker down, and won via ground and pound.
Yeah, along with Tuck and Harris, Russell Doan also got his opponent out of there pretty quickly, Dima. Sasaki and Jin Lin were able to get impressive wins in fights that they were losing at one point. So, especially Sasaki's win, man. It seemed like Scoggins was getting the better of him pretty handily, even possibly getting 10-8 round in the first round and looking on its way to a 10-8 in the second, where Sasaki was able to get his back and choke him out. And, man, Jinlin and Camacho is a fight for the ages. It seemed like Camacho gassed a little bit towards the end. Excellent fight, nevertheless. Pudilova won her fight in a very exciting fight. And Mizuko Inoua's brother, Nakio Inoue, picked up an impressive win. Inoue, he was making his UFC debut, and he was fighting out of the Hakushkin Karate Fight Team, which is in Japan. His high-profile 22-year-old sister, Mizuku Inoue, also trains there. And that brings his record to 11-0, and he's only 20 years old. He was making his UFC debut.
Yeah, decent fight card from Singapore, not the most well-known, and it was definitely difficult to keep up with the time slot, but it was good shit nonetheless. Fight of the night goes to Li Jiangling and Frank Camacho. Like you said, that was a hell of a fight.
Yeah.
And performance of the night, obviously Holly Holm with the crazy kick and Ulka Sasaki.
Yeah, and Caceres and Rolando D was actually an excellent fight as well up until it ended. The referee stopped it because fighter couldn't see that well. He
It was
was
a cut.
worried about the safety of
Yeah,
the fighter.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But overall, man, the undercard was actually pretty thrilling, man. Good fights, and the whole card throughout ended up being pretty good. The only negative is 4:45 in the morning.
Good stuff. Other than time slot. Anyways, we are going to come back after a short break to discuss the up-and-coming Bellator 180 this weekend from New York, Madison Square Garden. This week's episode of Shoot the Ones podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Local Liquids, the premier vape shop located at 400 West Rosemary Street in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Listen, put down a pack of cigarettes and check out www.local-liquids.com for their wide variety of e-liquids, devices, and coil selection. Tell them Dema sent you for an additional 10% off your purchase. Local Liquids, your premier North Carolina vape shop. And now to the show.
Welcome back, Shoot the Ones listeners. And yeah, what a card we're going to talk about here, man. Bellator 180. This is going down at the famed Madison Square Garden in New York. This is the second Bellator pay-per-view. The first attempt was at 120 with varied success, and they're expecting pretty good success off of this show. And it's a pretty stacked main event card. And from all accounts that I've heard from Scott Coker, he's not going to do this pay-per-view thing very much. He's only going to do a pay-per-view. And me and you, Dema, we're big fans of Coker. So I kind of see where he's going. I listen to pretty much all of his interviews. I kind of see where he's getting at with this. He's only going to do pay-per-views if he's got like a card similar to this where he feels it's pay-per-view worthy.
I wouldn't use word fan. He's a promoter. I mean, he's a good businessman. I admire him. I have respect for him, and he's done right by a lot of fighters. So
I think that, and I think he's good for Bellator.
And he's good. He's good for business. He's good at doing everything that UFC doesn't touch. So.
And also by fan, I mean like we feel he's good for MMA as well.
He is. He is good for. So in that sense of a word, I am a fan. So he's good for MMA. He's good. In that sense, he creates options for other fighters to go and explore. UFC doesn't have that big of a monopoly over mixed martial arts as whole.
Yeah, and enough about Scott Coker. Let's get to this great card, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, Bellator is going balls to the wall. The first one, the first pay-per-view they did was done by what's his name, Bjorn Rebney.
Yeah.
So this is going to be Scott's attempt at pay-per-view, and man, this is going to be a hell of a card.
I agree, and Scott has got to 1 million viewers before. I think this gets way more than 1 million. I mean, we got Fedor on here, we got Chael, Vanderlei, along with some of the Bellator really good, really good prospects that they already had on their roster, like Michael Chandler and Douglas Lima. Without even getting to the main event, Demo, we have Phil Davis versus Ryan Bader on the undercard. I mean, this is stacked for Bellator.
I was going to add, as well as an array of veterans coming over from UFC looking to, make their path in Bellator.
Yep, and we even have Aaron Pico, who was arguably the biggest signee of the year, debuting. This is a big-time wrestler.
Moving into the next bout of the card, in the welterweight division, Douglas Lima is defending his belt against Lawrence Larkin.
This is a championship fight. Douglas Lima won his title back by beating Andrei Koreshkov in Israel by knockout. And Lorenz Larkin is coming over. Who were his last couple fights, Demo, there?
Lorenz Larkin is coming off, I believe, 2 wins.
Jorge Masvidal and Neil Magny, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. In the UFC, which, is a
And
hell of an impressive
and those are both top 10 competitors, and
repertoire.
he was a top 10 competitor. So, I mean, it's a little surprising because he was still below Rory that he's the guy that's getting the title shot right away. But Larkin is a good fighter in his own right and presents a lot of issues to Lima. I'm expecting a real good fight. Lima's a little bit underrated coming in this fight. He's one of the biggest welterweights I've ever seen.
The way I see it, I mean, you can't lose it. They're building their welterweight division. It's such a talent-heavy division overall in UFC, Bellator, that the talent is spilling all over the place, like from UFC into the Bellator, and we're gonna get to see some of these really exciting matchups here in Bellator. No doubt about it. You have Lorenz Larkin, Lima in there. The winner of that is gonna fight Rory McDonald, and that's going to be an exciting matchup, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see these strikers go 5 rounds also. And, I mean, these are good MMA fighters we got on this card.
Yeah, Larkin was a little bit of a head scratcher as to he was let go and UFC didn't want to keep him, but I think he's gonna do good here at Bellator.
Yeah, he's already got a relationship with Coker from the Strikeforce days. And I think it was like UFC wanted him back to an extent, but Bellator was given a better offer, and I think he just wanted to test the market. So I'm happy to see, good fighters go to other places. We get to see kind of matchups that we wouldn't have got to see before,
For
such as
sure.
this one.
For sure.
Coming up next on the card, also a championship fight, Michael Chandler defends his belt against up-and-comer Brent Primas.
Yeah, Michael Chandler is staple of Bellator lightweight division, is their longest reigning champ, and as you like to say, the statement I agree with myself. He is the highest top level skill wise that's not currently fighting for the top organization, that's UFC.
Yeah, I agree with the most established guy, maybe along with Ben Askren.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. What can you tell me about Primus? I'm not so familiar with his opponent. Chandler's been around, and I'm accustomed to seeing him. His opponent, on the other hand, is a bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about Primus. I know he's got 5 Bellator fights. I know his last 2 fights were against better competition. He beat Derek Anderson and he beat Glearston Santos. However, those were both by split decision. And this is a huge step up in competition. I mean, Michael Chandler has been in there with the best Bellator's had to offer and typically has a lot of success in there. Brent Primus has a really good game. He trains over there with Chael Sonnen in Oregon. He's a good fighter, but this is going to be a really tough fight. And I expect Michael Chandler to be just as good a wrestler with the speed advantage. And Michael Chandler can finish you in many ways. He's got submissions, he's got good hands, and he's got a good wrestling game to boot. So this is going to be a tough fight for Primus, but maybe Primus can make a name for himself, on pay-per-view.
I agree with your assessment, mate. Couple of things I wanted to mention about Primus. He is 7-0, so he is currently undefeated. He is not the most active fighter. He fights about 1 time a year, so maybe some ring rust, maybe not. He does seem to be used to fighting this way.
Yeah, another fun championship fight. And now we get into the legendary fights, huh?
Yeah, man, the main event worthy. Despite not being championship fight belts, we get to see the show here. Co-main event and main event.
Yeah, and this is what's making this a pay-per-view. This is what the people are paying their money to see.
Yes, sir. So, co-main event slot gets the heavyweight bout between Fedor Emelianenko and Matt the Meathead Mitrione.
Yeah, Last Emperor versus Meathead. This is a good fight, Dema. I know Chael's been on his show flaunting Matt Mitrione as being the best heavyweight of our times. And however, that's very false. Matt Mitrione is a good heavyweight. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he's fought the who's who of the UFC division, has had success against, some of their veterans, and yeah, he's definitely no slouch, man. He's one of the more athletic guys in the heavyweight division. Like, Meathead moves good.
I agree. He's probably in that top 15 to 12 range in the world at that weight class. And he's going against Fedor Emelianenko, who's got a very similar style to himself. He moves around well. He's got an excellent sambo base where he's able to, pretty much if you get a clinch with Fedor, he's able to typically get on top of you, regardless of how you guys are falling to the ground, which his sambo base helps a lot with. The thing that I'm interested in is I look at Fedor as a much more skilled fighter than Matt Mitrione. He's got a lot more tools in the toolbox. But Fedor struggled against the really big guys that also have some skill like Matt Mitrione. He had a real hard time with Bigfoot just kind of overpowering him.
Yeah, and despite having all of these tools in his toolbox, um, a thing that kind of baffles me about Fedor is sometimes he throws everything out the window and gets in these crazy fucking exchanges with people where he just doesn't give a fuck, and he makes mistakes in those exchanges when he becomes a little bit ruthless there, reckless. It's reckless, man.
Yeah, Dima, another intriguing thing is Matt Mitrione, like to be honest, yeah, he looked very excellent, Fedor, that is. He looked excellent against Jadip Singh in his return. I mean, he looked like a world beater again. But who really is Jadip Singh? And why the hell was he in the cage with Fedor? And then he had that really rough match against Fabio Maldonado. So this by far is his toughest challenge since returning to MMA. And if we're being fair, Fedor hasn't looked like a world beater out there.
Yeah, Fedor's management is very gracefully picking his competition, and we got to see that. And Maldonado, man, it was a rough fight. Fabio Maldonado is one of those guys that can come in there and give you a bad night if you're not on your P's and Q's. And, man, that was a really tough fight there to watch. But they weren't going to, let Fedor.
They weren't going to stop that fight
Exactly,
by knockout.
they weren't going to stop it. So it was tough to see.
Yeah, and to Fedor's credit, he came back and won the second, third round.
He came back, and man, like zombie mode won that despite having a hell of a beating, or taking a hell of a beating in the first.
Yeah, with that being said, though, Mitrione is a much tougher opponent in my eyes than Fabio Maldonado. Like, I think if he fought Maldonado, he would get Maldonado out there quick.
He poses different challenges. Like, he's not as technical with his hands.
Yeah, but I was going to say, with that being said, like we talked about in the last episode, MMA math doesn't really work. This is a new fight. Then they come out with a new strategy. If you notice, Fedor could have fought another opponent when the first fight happened, but he said, no, I trained for this guy. I want to fight this guy. This is who I signed the paper with, So that's what's going to happen here. This fight's finally going to happen. Hopefully, knock on wood, Matt Mitrione doesn't get a kidney stone this time. Because he's never pulled out of fights before, so I actually believe the guy, But hopefully he makes it, and I know Fedor's going to make it. He's got a history of making it to fights. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me as well.
And the main event, which I can't really say is more high profile than the co-main event, but we got two really high profile guys in there, and this is a fight that's been brewing for years, since they were tough coaches together and they had all that conflict and friction. They never got to fight Dema. Chael Sonnen is finally going to get to fight Wanderlei Silva, who hasn't been showing up to the press conferences. Hopefully he shows up to the fight, because this is a fight people still want to see. It's the top of the bill.
Man, this fight was nutty years ago when they were going to do it with Tough, and this fight is as nutty as ever. Here several years later, here at main stage of Madison Square Garden here at Bellator. I mean, this fight right here kind of embodies what Bellator is. Biggest names, way past their prime, kind of squashing some kind of beef that they established from way back in the day.
Like Wanderlei Silva, back in his heyday, was pretty much what John Jones is doing today. He's not on the same level, but he was at one point the best light heavyweight in the world for a short period of time. considered to be the best light heavyweight in the world. And Chael Sonnen, at one point in his career, he had the most effective wrestling game for MMA. So this is an interesting fight. I definitely give Chael the advantage here because I think that his skills haven't declined as much. The fight with Tito makes me a little nervous. The way that Tito was able to have his way, I didn't see that coming. I think he rebounds here.
Yeah, and I kind of hope so, because it would be really, really bad if Chael Sonnen kind of comes in there. Bellator is excited to sign him as you know.
Well, these are both huge signings.
Indeed. But yeah, I'm from Chael's side to Tito, who then goes on to retire, and then Vandy, who comes in after not fighting for God knows how long.
Yeah, but like him or hate him, Wanderlei Silva is a legend of the sport. When people hear the name Wanderlei Silva, even if they're not MMA fans, they know who the hell that is.
Exactly. So, which will make this a legend fight, and I'm always down to watch a legends fight.
Yeah, and Chael Sonnen, man, he's been making a name for himself in podcasting, and he does a little bit of everything. He probably works 12 jobs,
Yeah, good for Chael, man. Good for Chael.
Yeah, I'm happy for him, but let's be honest, he didn't look very good in the last fight. So I'm hoping for better this time, and I think he's got better in him. I think he's, from all I've been hearing, I feel like he's been training hard. I think I said this last time, though. So I'm a little bit weary this time, but I think he's got the right skill set to beat Wanderlei Silva, who's gonna be a tough fight there in the first round. Wanderlei's gonna probably come at him like a bat out of hell.
I will point out something. When they had their little scuffle at Tough, Vandy just came in there heated, and Chael just really calmly took advantage of that forward motion and took him down pretty much with ease. I don't know, not much to judge off, but I think that kind of foreshadows the fight there. We're gonna see a takedown.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I don't know. I mean, Wanderlei does have good takedown defense, but Chael's got one of the best shots in MMA. But does he still have that? Is what we're gonna find out this fight.
Yeah, man. Main card, top to bottom, looks really, really dope. Like, you see this coming from Bellator, and you're like, yeah, right on, Bellator.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting a Bellator pay-per-view, but I also didn't expect myself to be like, hey, I think that's fair. This is pay-per-view worthy.
Indeed. Couple of other fights not on the pay-per-view card. As we already mentioned before, Phil Davis is going to fight Ryan Bader, which is going to be on the Spike TV card. We have Ryan Couture coming back to fight the son of famous Randy Couture.
You also have James Gallagher versus Chinzo Machida in a pretty high-profile fight, and Neiman Gracie is on this card as well.
So yeah, something to look out there.
The other thing I wanted to point out about those fights is that Phil Davis Ryan Bader fight is also for a championship. So there will be 3 championship fights on this card.
Yeah, kind of crazy to see they relinquished a championship fight between such high-profile light heavyweights for a Spike TV card, but I trust to see that Bellator knows what they're doing.
I agree. I also find it curious that Aaron Pico versus Zach Freeman made it over them. At the same time, Aaron Pico is a huge signing for them, so I kind of see where they want to use this exposure. And I don't know, they're taking a gamble on this kid. But I think it's an educated gamble. But that's not all. We also have UFC Fight Night 112, Chiesa versus Lee, which me and Dema are going to go over the main event right after this break. Listeners, did you enjoy the music you heard on today's podcast? Shoot the Ones collaborates with the local and up-and-coming top music producers in the area. Music for today's podcast was brought to you by Jay Blankton Deep Theory. Check out the link to their SoundCloud page in our description.
Welcome back, loyal listeners. The fun does not stop as we have our second fight event of the weekend with UFC Fight Night. Chiesa versus Lee, also known as Fight Night 112.
Yeah, this is 3 weeks in a row we've had a fight night card, and this is an exciting main event, man. They got two guys with bad blood. We're gonna start our preview at the main card, starting with the first fight. BJ Penn makes his return after completely getting dominated by Yair Rodriguez, and what was kind of unfair fight to an extent when you look at the age difference. He's getting a much more practical fight here versus Dennis Sivir, who also has not fought since 2015 and also is a veteran in the game like himself.
And to be fair, they switched it on him like 3 times. Originally, this was the fight that was supposed to happen. Originally, BJ Penn's opponent was going to be Dennis Sivir. Then they switched it. They gave him Lamas, which was going to be a nutty fight. That got scrapped, and then he got Yair Rodriguez. Not much of a better replace or
And he was suspended
alternate.
for a time because he had that IV ban or whatever. He used the IV out of competition, but
Yeah.
I don't know how that works exactly. But when you got a bunch of cheaters, this guy used the IV for something he actually needed, but did a little bit too much.
And they honestly admitted to doing it. So, kind of a strange situation. But, going back to the fight, this was the fight that was supposed to happen, and it's good UFC kind of make that amendment and go on through and make this fight that was going to originally take place.
Yeah, interesting thing. Dennis Siver's last fight was against Kawajiri, who's no longer in the UFC, who recently lost to one of the Gracies. And, Dennis Siver, he's got a real good kicking game. And BJ Penn didn't look that much different in his last fight versus Yair. Granted, he was getting kind of dominated there in the striking due to the speed aspect. But, I see this as a real close fight. Good fight. Good matchmaking, like you said.
Well, I don't know how to call it exactly. I mean, like, I don't want to shit on Penn, but he did not look great at all. I don't know how to.
He did land a couple punches in the exchanges, though. I mean, the speed difference was what was making him look bad.
Yeah, he did, and
He's
that's the reason why you can't really judge him off of that last one.
Yeah, I don't think Dennis Siver's going to be coming at the same speed Yair Rodriguez was.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying it's going to be really weird to see. Dennis Sivir hasn't fought in forever, and you can't really. This fight can go either way. I don't know what kind of shape either of the guys in and how they're going to come in there. So, kind of a pick 'em fight.
Yeah, excellent curtain jerker, man. Always, BJ Penn's a real legend of the sport, so always exciting to see him in there.
Yeah, I'll be watching it for sure. Moving into the next bout in the welterweight division, Tim Means is facing against Alex Garcia.
Yeah, this is another very evenly matched fight. Tim Means is coming off of a loss to Alex Oliveira, and Alex Garcia is coming off of a win, and he beat Mike Pyle by knockout in the first round. And Mike Pyle's also a veteran of the game, kind of like Tim Means is. Alex Garcia, he's a real strong guy, He kind of compact welterweight, and he's a real powerful welterweight. Tim Means is a very scrappy veteran, and he good everywhere. So this is an intriguing fight to see how Tim deals with Alex's power.
Interesting fight. You have Tim Means coming off of that 2 fights series against Oliveira, in which he unfortunately did lose against in his last fight. And you have Alex Garcia coming off of a win against Mike Pyle, which was a pretty interesting knockout there. So, yeah, it's a good fight.
Agreed. Coming up next in the light heavyweight division, we have Joachim Christensen taking on Dominic Reyes. And Joachim Christensen hasn't had, the most success in the UFC. He has gotten a win. That was over Bohan Milkovic. However, he does have losses in the UFC to Henrique da Silva versus Gajamurad Antagulov. His opponent, Dominic Reyes, Dema, I don't know a ton about him. I know he's pretty good with the head kicks.
Yeah, we did a little bit of research going into this because we didn't know much about either of the guy. Like you said, Joachim is a Danish fighter. He's got a 2-1 record, one and
One
two,
and two.
1-2,
That's
correct.
accurate. Yes, sir.
And Reyes is currently undefeated. This would be his UFC debut. We come to learn, and his last two fights are, particular thing of interest because both of them are first round finishes, and both of them were done via high kick, TKO or KO.
I agree. And Joachim Christensen's billed as a striker himself. So it's always interesting to see guys that big that have some technique behind their strikes getting in there and facing each other.
Yeah, and it's light heavyweight division, so big guys. Should be interesting to see. In next fight in women's strawweight division, Felice Herrig is fighting Justine Kish.
Yeah, Dema. Felice Herring versus Justin Keach, man. Excellent fight. And Herring is coming off of that fight where she was the underdog to Alexa Grasso, who had a lot of steam behind her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to look very good against Grasso and get that win. This was an exciting fight. Kish herself is a real tough opponent with a very strong karate background. I've always been real big on Kish. She's a Russian American fighter, and she's really good, man.
Prior to Alexa Grasso performance, Felice Herring did have a submission finish against. Can you remind me?
Yes, it was another big prospect. She's Curran. Was it Caitlin Curran?
Yeah, that was correct, Caitlin Curran, which was an impressive showing. And Justin Kish, if I am correct, is still undefeated to this point. She did have a little bit of a bump on the road with an injury during her UFC debut with the Ultimate Fighter, but she's back, and she's looking to do her thing.
You're accurate. She's 2-0 now in the UFC against Nina Ansaroff and Ashley Yoder. And she does have a win against Randa Marcos outside of the UFC prior to her entry. And I mean, she's a very good prospect. She's got a kickboxing record of 18-2, MMA record of 6-0, and she's a second degree black belt in karate.
And she's of Russian descent, which makes us a fan of her automatically, like here at Shoot the Ones.
I agree, but let's not sleep on this matchup. Like you said, Felice Herrig has been going through prospects recently.
Exactly. So, is this going to be the question is this going to be consistent with what Felice has been doing in her last two, or are we finally going to see a challenger worthy of Felice be able to hang in there with her?
Yeah, I tend to believe what you just said, the last one that you said. I think that this is going to be that opponent that's a little bit higher level than the other prospects. However, what I do appreciate, Felice Herring, maybe you don't like her personality, like I'm not a big fan of what she does outside of MMA. She wants to be seen and heard and flaunted, I guess. But she's a good fighter in there. She's got good skills. She's been around the game for a long time, and she's well rounded. I think what's gonna hurt her in this fight is Justine Kish is a much stronger opponent than she's used to physically, and that's gonna be the difference. I think as well as she's a very good striker with that second degree karate black belt.
Indeed. I don't hate on Felice. She is who he is. I think I actually admire her in a lot of aspects. She's smart. She got the looks. She uses them to sell the fight. She's went on and said this before. So yeah, I don't mind Felice, and like you said before, she is a good fighter. I respect her more for that than her looks. But
She's
yeah,
definitely a pioneer of the women's game.
yeah, exactly. She's been around for a long time, and she's got the cocky, brash attitude as well, which some people are a little bit turned off by. I guess Justin Quiche is a little bit more humble here, and yeah, this is a good fight on paper.
To add to what you just said, this is kind of like the new guard versus the old guard in a way. You
Exactly.
know, and that kind of makes this fight interesting to me. There's another interesting female fight earlier on the card as well. Carla Esparza, Mariana Moroz. But back to this fight, it's a really good one.
Yes, sir.
Moving right along, in the co-main event, Tim Boetsch meets Johnny Hendricks, who's going to make his second middleweight return.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see. I think I like how they're handling Johnny Hendricks at middleweight. You know, they're not giving him the craziest fights in where he's like really outmatched or outsized, but they're slowly building him up in the division, kind of giving him bigger and bigger step ups.
Yeah, Big Rig had kind of a tough time there at welterweight towards the end. So I think they're putting that a little bit in account when they're picking these matchups. I believe his first fight at middleweight was Hector Lombard. Now he's fighting Tim Boetsch. You know, guys that he should come in as the favored against. You know, hypothetically, he should have the skills to beat. And he's still an exciting guy. I mean, you got to remember this is the former welterweight champion. And he's got kind of a different skill set today, but he's still really good. He's still a really good wrestler and a good fighter. Um, and I think this is a much better weight class. I like we were talking about with RDA how he's able to come in healthy. I think Hendricks is able to do that at this weight class a lot better. But like you said, he's very outsized in a lot of his fights. The way that I see this fight, Dema, is I think Johnny Hendricks should have the skills to win everywhere, but he doesn't have the knockout power. But he doesn't have the knockout power that Tim Boetsch possesses.
Yeah, and there's a couple of advantages that Tim Boetsch will have: knockout power, and you know his hand game being one. I think he's also a little bit stronger of the two as well. But I think Johnny has the skill set to beat him, like you said. I think he's a little bit more skilled and accomplished. His wrestling is top notch, and you know he is the former champion, like you said. He's got the experience in there. He knows what it takes to win.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dima. Johnny Hendricks is coming up from welterweight. Tim Boetsch is a guy that's fought at light heavyweight before, you know, and had some success at light heavyweight. So there might be a pretty big size difference, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I would like to see myself how Johnny Hendricks is able to negate the power, the size advantage, and get around the potential KO shot that Tim Boetsch is dangerous for.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's going to lie is on if he's able to implement his wrestling game. And Tim Boetsch is a wrestler as well.
Yeah,
So,
he's gonna need to move around really well and set up the wrestling in order to get it done here.
yeah, because like we were talking about prior to the show, Johnny Hendricks doesn't possess that knockout power that he did when he knocked out John Fitch back in the day.
Yeah, and you're fighting bigger guys that are you gotta hit them harder. You're moving up a division.
But I could still see him having some success here, especially in this fight.
Yeah, I think like I said before, the movement is key here. He's got to move around a bigger opponent and really make Tim work for it.
Yeah. If you had to make an early prediction, who you got here?
Provided Johnny doesn't make any mistakes, I think I got him. I think he's got the skills to pay the bills here again at middleweight division.
I agree with you. I think he wins this fight, but I could see Boach getting the KO as well.
I mean, Boich is one of those guys that he's a dark horse in a lot of fights. He can go in there and stifle
Yeah,
people's
he's
game.
that, and he's got a lot of power. And one thing he does well that a lot of people aren't great at, Dima, is he's really solid at the dirty boxing game. Cormier is good at it, but not a ton of MMA fighters are really great at the dirty boxing
Yeah,
game.
like his clinch striking
And Boach is really good with the short shots.
and the knees, the uppercuts. You make a good point.
Two veterans though.
Exactly. I was just thinking, Johnny's gonna need to. He's gonna be coming in and closing the distance into what could potentially be kind of dangerous because Tim Boich doesn't mind being close, considering he's a good clinch striker.
Yeah, I think he doesn't mind being close, but at the same time, he doesn't want to be on his back.
or against the fence.
Because Johnny Hendricks does still have good ground and pound, and if he gets him down there, it's going to be a tough round for Tim Boetsch. It's going to be interesting. We'll see if Johnny Hendricks can get that takedown.
Yeah, I think if he gets the takedown, he keeps him down, and Tim Boetsch isn't exactly known for his ability to get up. Moving on into the main event slot of the night, Michael Chiesa is going to be fighting Kevin Lee in what is an anticipated bout.
Yeah, and all week now, they've been playing that clip of them at the press conference. And, that's all fun and stuff, and it helps the promotion. But this is a good fight overall, man. Both these guys have really intriguing skills. Kevin Lee is an excellent wrestler, great on the back, good strikes. Michael Chiesa is one of the best in the UFC when he gets her back, and he's a very good grappler, pretty solid wrestler. This is a good fight. I'm very intrigued by this main event.
Yeah, man, I think it's a pick 'em fight for me, with a slight advantage. If I had to pick one or the other, being to Chiesa, I think he poses a couple of really unique challenges in his reach and ranginess. I think that combined with grappling is a pretty lethal weapon. I do rank them pretty close together as far as their grappling and wrestling ability. I think that's where their bread and butter lies as far as their game. I think I do give an advantage to Lee as being a better wrestler, boxer, or a better striker as far as mixed martial arts is concerned. But man, Chiesa is like really good at closing the distance and negating a lot of people's, striking ability.
Yeah, both of these guys are coming off of a nice little run of success. Kevin Lee's had 4 wins in a row, and Michael Chiesa's had 3 wins in a row, and against a lot of guys that I respect. Kevin Lee's wins are against Efrain Escudero, Jake Matthews, Magomed Mustafayev, and Francisco Trinaldo in his last 4. And Dema, can you help me out with who Michael Chiesa had?
Yep, he beat Daniel Dariush, Jim Miller, Mitch Clark.
Both have beaten a lot of these good up and coming prospects, and this is a good fight between two guys with a lot of momentum, very similar skill sets. And the betting line, like you said, it's minus 125 Kevin Lee, I think minus 105 for Mike Chiesa, so it's pretty darn even money. And I disagree with you. I'm giving Kevin Lee a slight edge due to like when he beat Mustafayev, Francisco Trinaldo, he looked like a world beater in those fights. I mean, and even before that, Jake Matthews, who's you're gonna hear a lot of Jake Matthews' name, and so I mean Michael Chiesa also he's a dangerous opponent. He's got a real dangerous squeeze as we saw against Benio Dariush, where he didn't even have the choke applied to a jiu-jitsu black belt, a well-respected jiu-jitsu black belt like Dariush. It was able to squeeze him to a tap out. So when Chiesa's got your back, it's dangerous territory right there. When he can tap out second, third degree black belt, in that quick a time. But I do think Lee holds a lot of advantages in this fight. It's interesting. And another key note to this fight, Dima, is Chiesa's a lot longer, rangier guy than Kevin Lee.
Yeah, which makes, that in combination with grappling is a very tough challenge against a shorter Lee. Lee does have some advantages of his own, man. I like to keep saying, he might have striking advantage. That maybe not so much the case with technique, but he does seem to be more powerful, more athletic guy. So, yeah, I think. What's up?
Interesting thing to note. I said that Chiesa is the much taller fighter. I think Chiesa's like 6'1", 6'2". But I said he was the rangier fighter, which is kind of false. He's actually got 1-inch reach disadvantage. Kevin Lee's got a 77-inch reach, while Chiesa's only got 76-inch reach. Which is kind of interesting for the smaller guy to have a longer reach.
That's good information there. I would anticipate the taller guy to have a reach advantage, which is not actually the case here. So, yeah. I mean, with not so much of a reach advantage.
Hmm.
Kevin Lee can get in there and put his hands on him if Chiesa is not able to, initiate the grappling sequences that he needs to initiate.
Agreed, man. This is a real pick'em fight and a real fun main event. A real intriguing fight there at the lightweight division.
Yeah, and there's been some great shit talking between the two. There's been that scuffle at the weigh-ins. They planted the seed for this fight. They both wanted it. Not so much Chiesa. I think Lee called him out.
Yeah, well, Chiesa wants to fight him now.
Yeah, for sure.
He done talked about Chiesa's mama, which apparently is one of his soft spots.
That's a no-no when it comes to Chiesa.
Yeah. But, I mean, regardless if it's hype or build-up, these guys have the skills to pay the bills, as they say, these are two good prospects that probably deserve a main event or a co-main event slot anyways without the extra lead-up.
Yeah, for sure. They deserve that main event. I do have a question for you. Who do you think had the tougher level of competition in their mixed martial arts career?
Well, Chiesa claims he has. And I would say, well, see, the thing about it for me is with Kevin Lee, his last, maybe not Efron Escudero, but Jake Matthews, Mustafayev, and his most recent win, Francisco Trinaldo. I have a lot of respect for all three of those guys. Like, maybe not Trinaldo, but the other two guys, I still expect to somehow reach the top of the division at some point. And for Kevin Lee to be able to go in there and outclass both of them with the skills and finish both of them, and Kevin Lee's finished all three of those guys, is super impressive to me. But Michael Chiesa's also finishing opponents. Michael Chiesa's his win over Benyil Dariush is probably better than any win that Kevin Lee has on his record. So you got to also put that into account. So I don't know how to answer that question really.
Here's what makes it interesting. I think Kevin Lee's last four, the win streak, overall is more impressive than Chiesa's 3-win fight streak because of the quality of opponents. But that Dariush, like you said, is the highest quality opponent.
Yeah, Dariush was beating Barbosa for a good portion of that fight.
Yeah.
Before he got knocked out. He's no slouch in there.
Exactly.
And due to his high-level jiu-jitsu and Chiesa, I didn't mean to cut you off, but his high-level jiu-jitsu and Chiesa being able to finish him with a submission was really super impressive about that.
Yeah, all good points. I also wanted to point out both of them fought Al Iaquinta, and Chiesa did beat Al Iaquinta in the tough finale, if I recall correctly. And Kevin Lee had suffered a loss against Iaquinta. And I know MMA math doesn't mean shit, but I just thought I would throw that in there. They had a common opponent.
And interesting to note, that fight with Al Iaquinta, where he won by submission rear naked choke in the first round, that was the Ultimate Fighter finale. And to be fair, it's not the same Al Iaquinta there is today. But looking at Chiesa's record, he has had a real interesting and successful record in the UFC. Only have losses to Joe Loizon and Jorge Masvidal, while amounting a good 6-2 record in the UFC.
Yeah, right on. It's going to be an exciting main event, exciting co-main event, just overall exciting weekend of fights coming from Bellator, UFC. It's a real treat if you are a fan of the sport.
Yeah, Dema, I'm really pumped about this weekend, man. I'm to be fair, I'm more looking forward for the Bellator 180 card, but it's always a treat to have fights the next day.
Yeah, return of the last emperor, the meathead. Chael Sonnen is fighting Wanderlei Silva. I mean, this is the thing of legends, Genya.
Yeah, man, it's a real treat, man. I enjoyed, talking about it here on the show. I'm really looking forward to watching these fights.
For sure, for sure. Where can our viewers find us?
You can always find us on SoundCloud, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, and MMApodcast.com. Thanks again for joining us, and we really appreciate all your support and feedback.
Yeah, Genya, it's been an exciting and action-packed episode 19 of Shoot the Ones podcast. Next week, we'll be excited to bring you episode 20 of our podcast, the Big 2-0. We're going to discuss the events that just happened this weekend, the Bellator 180 and the UFC Fight Night 112. And we'll also do a preview for the Ultimate Fighter finale, Tough 25.
Well said, Dema. This has been a blast, man. I really had fun. This is definitely one of our longest episodes, just because it had so many fights in there, man. 2 different cards. We had a fun night in Singapore. It was a fun episode for me. And like you said, we got that tough finale coming up with a main event, with a fight that I've really been looking forward to. You know, a sneaky good fight between Justin Gaethje making his UFC debut and UFC vet Michael Johnson.
Yeah, man. It's been a lot of content, but it's also been a lot of fun to cover. So stay tuned. We have a couple of really fun events coming up, and if you're a fan of the sport, this weekend coming up is really going to be a treat for you. So be on the lookout for the Big 2-0, episode 20, coming from us, Dema and Genya. And thanks again for joining us. Dema and Genya, out.